Well, I think it's been a tumultuous few years for a Suikoden fan, with Rabbit and Bear Studios, which comprised of many of the developers and creators of the original games, suffering a devastating loss with the passing of series' original creator and head of that studio, Yoshitaka Murayama. Fans are going to be relieved then to hear that the remastered editions of two of their favourite games in Suikoden 1 and 2, Gate Rune and Dunnan Unification Wars, have been handled with a lot of care and attention. We'll specifically be looking at the Nintendo Switch versions, and yes, in our video yesterday we do have a copy of this one to give away. I'll pop a link to that video as well in the description for you to check out. Does the collection restore the true rune of classic RPG greatness, or does it feel more like a failed recruitment attempt? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp, now let's find out. Now, chiefly in terms of story as well as the gameplay you're going to see on screen, I'm going to focus on Suikoden 1, not because it needs more attention, but I'm very aware that a lot of players haven't played this just by reading the comments from yesterday, so I do want to avoid spoilers. I will give you all the pertinent information, but try and keep those to a minimum. So Suikoden 1 then tells the story of a rebellion against a corrupt empire. Now, while we might have heard this 1,000 times at this stage in the game, the way it was handled originally was really impressive and felt quite unique. It follows the journey of a young noble, whom you do get to name by the way, as he tries to make a decision between what he's used to and what feels right. To that end, he ends up leading a band whose sole purpose it is to bring balance. Not to the Force, no, to the world. I think it's fair to say that Suikoden 2 is a more adult-themed game, and both titles at their heart have companionship, building up a vast group of companions up to 108, but the sequel features a much better villain in my opinion. In fact, one of the best villains in JRPG history. For me, that is a massive driving factor, as there's nothing worse than plodding through 100 hours, not really caring if you killed a villain or not. It's one of the reasons Kingdom Come Deliverance is so good, by the way, the sequel. The desire to end the villain there is strong. Now, gameplay-wise, we've got a number of different mechanics. We've got turn-based combat, one-on-one duels and army battles. And if at any point combat's too difficult, you can switch out the difficulty from easy, medium to hard from the in-game menu. Now, the turn-based combat allows you to have up to 6 party members, where you can choose attacking, defending, using runes, which is the game's magic system, items, unite abilities, which rely on 2 party members having a synergy so that they can do attacks together, and even a bribe option. Recruited characters can also have effects outside of combat, like allowing your movement to be faster on the world map. Now, while the turn-based system feels quite straightforward by today's standards, the introduction of the auto battle is great on a number of levels. Firstly, it's not a win button. It's really there for those more tedious grinding battles, the ones that you can win easily. You'll jump into combat, hit X and Y, activating auto combat as well as double speed, and you can just sit back and chill. However, if you hit a more difficult fight, that's where you can just have the speed activated, but because the auto battle will also have a random attack, meaning that it won't focus on one enemy, you will need to manually take over during certain key fights. The combat has a further layer of depth in the formations, with party members coming in 3 different flavors: short, medium and long range. This allows them to either attack the front and back lines of the enemies or only attack from certain lines. And if you accidentally position them in the wrong place, you're going to find them pretty pointless, as they can only defend. Overall, it's a system that works reasonably well, but you do tend to set and forget it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just the way it works out. Through both games, you'll be recruiting various characters, with loads of those being optional. When you then head out into the world, you get to choose who you want to take with you. They'll have a variety of different skills, but they'll also have different armor requirements, as well as base strength levels, attack, defense, and they'll only level up if they're actually gaining experience. That might sound obvious, but if they fall in combat and you defeat that very powerful enemy, they are going to get nothing. Both titles also have one-on-one duels. They follow a rock, paper, scissors style system, but you've got the choice of attack, defend, and what's called a desperation attack, with it not being completely random, as dialogue will give you clues as to what's coming. Finally, you've got the army battles. Suikoden 1's battles were very simplistic, following a similar system to that of the duels, while its sequel introduced tactical RPG elements, allowing you to move those around, position your forces strategically, and just give it a little more depth. But the core turn-based combat takes up the vast majority of your experience, and it does have random battles, but there are a couple of pointers there as well. When you change screens, it's almost like there's an invisible timer that's reset. I actually like that because I'm not a big fan of random combat. So having a little longer between those, it was good. Throw in the speed up mechanics and the auto battle, and it almost completely removes the annoyance of random combat. Another smaller side that's more related to the sound and audio, when you do enter one of those random battles, there isn't that harsh sound like you'd get in something like Final Fantasy. It's almost silent. A weird thing to mention, but it really did improve my experience. Exploration features many different towns and cities that you can visit, as well as a classic style world map and a slightly old school saving system that's had an unusual refinement. Now, you can either save when there's a save orb, or you can visit an inn and save there. But the new addition is that there's an auto save mechanic which saves the game when you enter an area with a save orb. I didn't actually realize that when we first recorded our video for yesterday, and that is a slightly strange way of doing things. It essentially renders it completely pointless unless you are someone who often forgets to save. One improvement that makes a massive difference is the log system. I use this predominantly as a quest log, as you can basically pin entries within it. So for example, if a piece of dialogue comes up telling you where you need to go next, you can pin that, thus meaning you never lose it and you can go back and check exactly the pertinent information. While these are clearly stated as remasters, I can't help but wonder if at some point they considered remaking certain elements. There are traits of a remake all over the place, and that's really nice, but you end up longing for further additions. One is in the inventory. As you buy items from shops or go to buy and sell gear, the option to quickly switch between your party is something that would have very much improve the experience. Instead, you back out, go to the next character, go back into the menus and repeat the same thing. And I must be fair and say that the second game does slightly improve inventory management with shared item storage. And I did find myself longing for a map when I was traveling around the world that showed the towns and cities. But again, these are things that hopefully Konami will bring in the next release. And I mean mainline release. I don't know if you saw they're releasing a mobile game. I think we'd all like to see another console release. Other elements of exploration include various shops, an appraisal shop so that you can have more mysterious items appraised for a cost. And there are quite a few different mini games. Eventually you'll get your own castle. This is where all of your recruited characters will join you. And with those comes new additions, so that you have a shop there, a vault, trading post. And if you're after RPGs that really do captivate you in terms of their narrative, then both do this with the sequel having that real drive in terms of an excellent villain. They certainly do have their flaws. There are moments, like one particular within the first game, where you have to win a random chance game or you can't progress in the story, and each time you lose all of your money, that leave you scratching your head as to why they ever made the final cut. But then there are also fantastic semi-dungeons like the Dwarf Mines that really remind you of what these games still do so well to this day. Now, I think the Japanese version introduced the 8-way directional control, which I actually wasn't aware of, but that is featured here. You can also sprint from the get-go, and they're nice quality of life features that make the game more accessible and just a bit quicker. The dialogue across both games has seen a number of changes. It might be single words, but is sometimes entire paragraphs where they have rewritten some of it to make it make more sense. Most of what I saw was fine in terms of changes, but I have come across one or two lines where they've over-explained the meaning. Thankfully though, I think on the whole, the improvements outweigh the negatives. But both games combined, I give gameplay 18 out of 20. I would have liked a few control improvements in the inventories, but generally they're fine. They score 17 out of 20. The graphical presentation is delightful in these games. I was very surprised by the differences. When viewed alongside the PlayStation original, you can see that every single scene has been completely reworked. From the introduction of new lighting effects, shadows, 3D lighting effects, but also subtly in the audio department with brand new sound effects that add a real sense of place to each scene. This is some excellent work for sure. The frame rate though isn't as good on the Nintendo Switch. 30 FPS is a slight disappointment, but it's also not a surprise. We saw similar with Eidon Chronicles 100 Heroes, and while there are a couple of performance drops here, it's much better than that release. Still, 60 would have been optimal. The soundtracks of both of these games are incredible. With remastered improvements, they sound clearer than ever, but it is those sound effects that have stood out to me the most. Entering areas you're familiar with and just hearing a different palette of audio, it does add a lot to it. I briefly mentioned that the combat transition doesn't make an annoying noise, and I stand by that. I think it just takes the edge off of some of those more jarring random battles. But I do notice, and it was in the original, there's this really distracting beeping sound that's used within the battle music. You can't always hear it, but when you do, you almost can't unhear it. It sounds like a menu being hit. See if you can hear it in this. Playing in handheld is as fantastic as you'd expect, and of course these are working in widescreen. With load times very reasonable, I will say the low transition between screens, the way it fades down is a tiny bit too slow for me. Whether that was implemented to hide some loading behind the scenes, I don't know, but personally I'd love that to just drop to black instantly and you're in the next screen. Visuals and performance combined though, that scores a solid 17 out of 20. The sound and audio scores 18 out of 20. As we mentioned yesterday, these will set you back £44.99 or your regional equivalent. There's a physical as well, and all versions give you both games. You have the gallery, you can access all of the game's music and soundtracks, and the quality of life features mentioned. It's a really good package in terms of overall value if you've not played them before, and even if you have, I still think it's well worth it. While the first game is slightly shorter, you're looking at a combined length of around 50 to 75 hours, depending on if you want to find and recruit all of the characters. They are top tier RPGs, and a lot of love has gone into these remasters. Value scores 19 out of 20. While these are excellent HD remasters, I think Konami may have potentially missed an opportunity to push for the full remake, as it feels like they're almost halfway there. Still, if you played the originals or if you didn't, this is a great way to do so. Some slight quirkiness with the save system aside, the Suikoden 1 and 2 remasters get a SwitchUp score of 89%. Let me know in the comments, are you picking these up? Have you already got your pre-orders, or are you diving in for the first time? Thank you to our Patreons, our members, all of you that enjoy the content, and as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!